In the glittering world of New York's elite, where wealth and power reign supreme, one woman's tragic death shatters the carefully constructed facade of perfection. As the funeral of beloved socialite Olivia Hartley unfolds, a shocking revelation turns mourning into mayhem, leaving everyone questioning who can truly be trusted. With tears still fresh and whispers growing louder, a web of secrets, lies, and betrayal begins to unravel, promising to expose the darkest corners of high society. What really happened to Olivia, and how far will those closest to her go to protect their own interests? Brace yourself for a roller coaster of emotions as this tale of love, loss, and ultimate betrayal unfolds, keeping you on the edge of your seat until the very last twist. On a crisp autumn morning in New York City, the air was thick with an eerie silence that seemed to blanket the entire Upper East Side. The usually bustling streets were subdued, as if the city itself was mourning. Outside the prestigious St. Patrick's Cathedral, a crowd of New York's elite gathered, their designer black attire a stark contrast to the golden leaves carpeting the sidewalk. This was no ordinary day, and this was certainly no ordinary funeral. The city's high society had come to bid farewell to Olivia Hartley, a name that had graced the society pages and charity gala guest lists for over 2 decades. At 42, Olivia had been more than just a socialite. She was a force of nature, known for her philanthropic efforts and her ability to turn any event into the talk of the town. As limousines pulled up one after another, disgorging mourners who dabbed at their eyes with monogrammed handkerchiefs, whispers rippled through the crowd. Where was Marcus? Olivia's husband of 15 years, Marcus Hartley, was conspicuously absent as the hour of the service approached. Inside the cathedral, Sophia Reynolds, Olivia's younger sister, stood rigidly by the ornate casket, her face a mask of grief and barely contained fury. Her eyes constantly darted to the massive oak doors, anticipating yet dreading her brother-in-law's arrival. He has the audacity to be late to his own wife's funeral, Sophia muttered to David Chen, Marcus's best friend and business partner, who stood loyally by her side. David, his usually jovial face creased with worry, placed a comforting hand on Sophia's arm. I'm sure there's an explanation, Sophia. Marcus loved Olivia, in his own way. Sophia's retort was cut short by a sudden hush falling over the gathered mourners. All heads turned toward the entrance, where Marcus Hartley had finally made his appearance. At 45, Marcus cut an impressive figure in his tailored black suit, his salt and pepper hair adding to his distinguished air. But it wasn't his late arrival that caused the collective gasp from the attendees. On Marcus's arm, clad in a black dress that was more appropriate for a cocktail party than a funeral, was a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. Her long blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and despite the somber occasion, a small, triumphant smile played at the corners of her red lips. Sophia's face drained of all color. "Veronica," she hissed, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. As Marcus made his way down the aisle, the young woman Veronica clung to him, her stiletto heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that seemed to mock the solemnity of the occasion. The couple stopped before the casket, and Marcus placed a single red rose atop it, a gesture that felt hollow in light of his companion. The priest, visibly uncomfortable, cleared his throat and began the service. But the usual words of comfort fell on deaf ears as the congregation's attention remained fixed on the scandal unfolding before them. Midway through the eulogy, Marcus suddenly stood up, pulling Veronica with him. He strode to the pulpit, gently but firmly moving the priest aside. The audience held its collective breath, smartphones discreetly emerging from pockets and purses, ready to capture whatever was about to unfold. "Friends, family," Marcus began, his voice strong and unwavering. "I know my actions today may seem unconventional, but Olivia always said life was for living, and she wouldn't want us to wallow in misery." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the church. Sophia gripped the pew in front of her so hard her knuckles turned white. Marcus continued, "In the spirit of embracing life and moving forward, as Olivia would have wanted, I have an announcement to make." He pulled Veronica closer, his arms snaking around her waist. "Veronica and I are engaged to be married. The cathedral erupted in shocked gasps and furious whispers. Smartphones lit up as texts flew from the hands of the scandalized guests. In the front pew, David's jaw dropped in disbelief, while Sophia's face contorted with a rage that seemed to radiate heat. "We had hoped to wait for a more appropriate time to share our joy," Marcus went on, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the reaction of the mourners. "But in light of recent tragic events, we felt it was important to embrace happiness where we find it." Veronica nodded, her eyes glistening with what could have been tears of joy or perfectly timed crocodile tears. "Olivia was such an inspiration," she added, her voice sickly sweet. "She would have wanted us all to find love and happiness." It was too much for Sophia. With a primal scream of fury, she launched herself toward the pulpit. "You bastards!" she shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "How dare you? How dare you stand there, over my sister's body, and announce this abomination?" David tried to restrain her, but Sophia was beyond reason. She pointed an accusing finger at Marcus and Veronica, her voice ringing out through the cathedral and undoubtedly carrying to the reporters gathered outside. "You killed her!" Sophia screamed, mascara-tinged tears streaming down her face. "You killed my sister, and now you're dancing on her grave." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Marcus's face, for the first time, showed a flicker of something: fear? Guilt? Before he regained his composure. "Sophia, you're upset. We all are. But these accusations are preposterous," he said smoothly, though a bead of sweat had formed on his brow. Veronica clung tighter to Marcus, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "How can you say such things?" she asked, her voice trembling perfectly. "We loved Olivia. Her death was a tragic accident." But Sophia was beyond listening. As security guards finally arrived to escort her out, she continued to hurl accusations. "This isn't over, Marcus. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. You won't get away with this." As Sophia was led away, her cries echoing through the stunned congregation, Marcus attempted to regain control of the situation. "Please," he addressed the mourners, "let's remember why we're here, to honor Olivia's memory." But the damage was done. The funeral of Olivia Hartley, once New York's darling socialite, had devolved into a spectacle that would dominate tabloid headlines for weeks to come. As the shaken guests filed out of the cathedral, their smartphones already buzzing with notifications from news alerts and social media, one thing was clear: this was only the beginning of a scandal that would shake New York society to its core. In the chaos of the aftermath, no one noticed David Chun slip quietly away, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. And in a darkened car across the street, a woman watched the scene unfold through tinted windows, a small smile playing on her lips as she spoke quietly into a phone. "It's done. The plan is in motion." The glittering New York skyline faded into the rearview mirror as a sleek black Audi R8 sped along the Long Island Expressway. Behind the wheel, Marcus Hartley's knuckles were white against the leather steering wheel, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. Beside him, Veronica scrolled through her phone, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from her fiancé. "Babe, we're trending," Veronica chirped, her voice a stark contrast to the heavy silence that had enveloped the car since they'd left the funeral. "Look at all these hashtags. Hashtag funeral fiasco, hashtag widower wedding, hashtag Olivia rolling in her grave." Marcus's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Enough, Veronica," he snapped, his cool facade finally cracking. "This isn't a game." Sophia's accusations. If people start digging. Veronica's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a calculating coldness that belied her years. "Relax, Marcus. No one's gonna find anything. We made sure of that, remember?" As the car zoomed past exit signs for the Hamptons, both passengers fell into an uneasy silence, their minds drifting back to the events that had led them to this moment. 3 months earlier, the Hartley mansion in the Hamptons was a vision of modern luxury, all glass and sleek lines perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. But inside, the atmosphere was far from serene. "How could you, Marcus?" Olivia's voice, usually so controlled, cracked with emotion. She stood in the center of their expansive living room, a crumpled piece of paper clutched in her trembling hand. With her, she's barely older than an intern. Marcus, caught off guard by his wife's early return from her charity gala in the city, struggled to maintain his composure. Olivia, darling, it's not what you think. Veronica is just a business associate. Olivia's bitter laugh cut through the room like a knife. A business associate who sends emails about how much she misses the taste of you? Don't insult my intelligence, Marcus. She strode to the bar cart, pouring herself a generous measure of scotch, Marcus's scotch. As she knocked it back, Marcus couldn't help but notice how the setting sun caught the silver in her hair, the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when they'd first met. When had they grown so far apart? I want a divorce, Olivia said quietly, her back to him as she gazed out at the churning ocean below. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. A divorce? Olivia, be reasonable. Think about what this would do to our reputation, our standing in society. The foundation. Olivia whirled on him, her eyes flashing. The foundation? Is that all you care about? Your precious image. She laughed again, a hollow sound that sent chills down Marcus's spine. Well, darling, wait until the board hears about your creative accounting. I wonder how many of our esteemed donors know where their money is really going. Marcus's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Olivia's smile was razor sharp. Did you think I was just a pretty face, Marcus? That I didn't pay attention to the numbers? I know everything. The offshore accounts, the shell companies. I've got it all documented. For a moment, Marcus saw his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Then, as quickly as it had come, the panic receded, replaced by a calm that was almost frightening in its intensity. Olivia, he said softly, taking a step toward her. Let's discuss this rationally. We can work something out. But Olivia was already heading for the stairs, her voice drifting back to him. There's nothing to discuss, Marcus. It's over. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. As her footsteps faded, Marcus pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the keys. Change of plans, he texted. She knows. We need to move now. The reply came almost instantly. On my way. Don't do anything stupid. An hour later, a red Corvette screeched into the driveway, and Veronica burst into the house, her face flushed with excitement and fear. What happened? She demanded. Marcus, now on his third scotch, filled her in on Olivia's discoveries and threats. Veronica's eyes widened with each revelation. This is bad, Marcus, she said, pacing the room. If she goes public with this, we're both finished. My past, your embezzlement, we'll end up in jail. Marcus nodded grimly. I know. We need to stop her. Veronica stopped pacing, fixing Marcus with a hard stare. Stop her how? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Outside, the waves crashed against the cliffs, as if nature itself was recoiling from what was about to unfold. We have no choice, Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. She has to be silenced. Veronica's face showed a flicker of hesitation before hardening with resolve. I know someone who can help, but Marcus, once we do this, there's no going back. Are you sure? Marcus drained his glass, setting it down with a decisive clink. I'm sure. Make the call. As Veronica stepped out onto the balcony, her phone pressed to her ear, Marcus stared at his reflection in the window. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. In the master bedroom upstairs, oblivious to the plot being hatched below, Olivia Hartley prepared for bed, unaware that it would be the last night of her life. 2 weeks later, the headline "Socialite Olivia Hartley found dead in Hampton's home" would shock New York society. The official cause: a tragic fall down the stairs after a night of heavy drinking. Terrible accident, everyone said. How awful for poor Marcus. Only 2 people knew the truth of what had happened that night. And as their car sped towards the Hamptons, leaving the chaos of the funeral behind, both Marcus and Veronica silently vowed that the truth would remain buried, no matter the cost. Little did they know, fate and Sophia had other plans. The harsh fluorescent lights of the 19th precinct buzzed overhead as Detective Lisa Rodriguez pored over the case files spread across her cluttered desk. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, but sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. Something about the Olivia Hartley case didn't sit right with her, and Lisa had learned long ago to trust her gut. She took a swig of lukewarm coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste, and focused on the crime scene photos. Olivia Hartley, sprawled at the bottom of the grand staircase in her Hamptons mansion, her neck bent at an unnatural angle. It looked like a straightforward accident, a tragic fall after one too many glasses of wine. But the more Lisa dug, the more inconsistencies she found. Burning the midnight oil again, Rodriguez? Lisa looked up to see her partner, Detective Mike Callahan, leaning against her desk. "Something's off about this one, Mike," she said, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "The husband's alibi is shakier than a house of cards in a hurricane." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Marcus Hartley? The golden boy of New York society? Good luck making anything stick to him." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Everyone's got skeletons in their closet, Mike. Even golden boys." As if on cue, Lisa's computer pinged with an incoming email. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. Well, she murmured. "Looks like Mr. Hartley and his new fiancée were busy little bees the night Olivia died." Mike leaned in, curiosity piqued. "What VE you got?" Lisa turned the screen toward him. "Credit card records." Marcus claimed he was at a business dinner in the city the night Olivia died, but his card was used to buy gas at a station 5 miles from their Hamptons house just an hour before the estimated time of death. Mike whistled low. "And the fiancée?" "Veronica Blake," Lisa said, pulling up another file. Her cell phone pinged off a tower near the Hartley mansion around the same time. But according to her statement, she was at home in her Manhattan apartment all night. "Sounds like we need to have another chat with the happy couple," Mike said, a predatory grin spreading across his face. Lisa nodded, already reaching for her jacket. "First thing in the morning. Let's see how well their stories hold up under pressure." As the detectives left the precinct, neither noticed the sleek black car parked across the street, its tinted windows concealing the occupant who watched their every move. Across town, in a dimly lit office overlooking Central Park, private investigator Mike Dawson was having a late-night meeting of his own. "I don't care what it costs," Sophia Reynolds said, her voice tight with barely contained fury. "I want to know everything about Marcus and that homewrecker he's engaged to. Every dirty secret, every skeleton in their closets. I want ammunition, Mr. Dawson." Mike leaned back in his chair, studying the woman before him. Grief and rage had etched deep lines into Sophia's face, aging her well beyond her 38 years. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said carefully, "are you sure you want to go down this road? Digging into people's pasts can often uncover things we'd rather not know." Sophia's eyes flashed dangerously. "My sister is dead, Mr. Dawson. Murdered, I'm certain of it. And I'll be damned if I let her killers walk free, no matter what it costs me." Mike nodded slowly, reaching for a notepad. "All right then, let's start at the beginning. Tell me everything you know about Marcus and Veronica's relationship." As Sophia began to speak, pouring out a tale of betrayal and suspicion, Mike's pen flew across the page. Hours passed, and the sky outside began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Finally, Sophia fell silent, emotionally exhausted. Mike looked down at his notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said slowly, "there's something here that doesn't add up. You mentioned that Marcus and Veronica met at a charity gala 6 months ago." "Correct." Sophia nodded, confused. "Yes, that's right. It was Olivia's annual fundraiser for the Children's Hospital." "Why?" Mike turned his laptop around, showing her a news article from over a year ago. The headline read, "Tech mogul Marcus Hartley invests millions in up-and-coming beauty startup." And there, smiling beside Marcus in the accompanying photo, was Veronica. Sophia's gasp was audible. That's impossible. They swore they'd only just met. Mike's eyes gleamed with the thrill of the hunt. Mrs. Reynolds, I think we've just found our first thread to pull. Let's see how far this web of lies unravels, shall we? As the sun rose over the New York skyline, casting long shadows across the city, 3 separate investigations into the death of Olivia Hartley were picking up steam. Detective Rodriguez, preparing to confront Marcus and Veronica. Mike Dawson digging into their shared past. And in a penthouse suite across town, Marcus Hartley woke with a start, a sense of impending doom settling over him like a shroud. The game was afoot, and the stakes were higher than anyone realized. For in the murky depths of the Hartley family's past lurked secrets so dark, so devastating, that their revelation would shake the very foundations of New York society. And somewhere, watching it all unfold, a shadowy figure smiled, knowing that the real show was only just beginning. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom sparkled with the light of 1,000 crystals, reflecting off the jewels and sequins of New York's elite. The annual Met Gala afterparty was in full swing, but beneath the veneer of champagne and laughter, an undercurrent of tension thrummed through the room. Marcus Hartley stood near the bar, nursing a scotch and trying to ignore the whispers and sidelong glances thrown his way. Just weeks ago, he would have been at the center of attention, holding court with fellow CEOs and socialites. Now, he felt like a pariah in his own world. Quite the fall from grace. Marcus? The voice made Marcus stiffen. He turned to face Richard Kensington, CEO of a rival tech firm and longtime frenemy. Richard, Marcus acknowledged with a curt nod. Enjoying the spectacle? Richard's smile was shark-like. Oh, immensely. It's not every day we get to witness such a dramatic shift in the social hierarchy. Tell me, how is the new fiancé? Settling into Olivia's shoes comfortably, I hope. Marcus's grip on his glass tightened, but before he could respond, a flash of red caught his eye. Veronica was making her way through the crowd, turning heads in a daring Versace gown. She sidled up to Marcus, wrapping a possessive arm around his waist. Darling, you simply must come meet the Vogue editor I was telling you about, she purred, deliberately ignoring Richard. She's dying to do a feature on us. As Veronica steered Marcus away, he caught sight of David Chun across the room. His oldest friend and business partner stood with a group of Silicon Valley types, but his eyes were fixed on Marcus, a mixture of concern and something else. Was it guilt? In his gaze, Marcus made a mental note to corner David later. He needed allies now more than ever, and David's recent aloofness was concerning. Across the ballroom, Sophia Reynolds made her entrance, a vision in black Chanel. Heads turned and conversations hushed as she swept through the crowd. Unlike Marcus, the whispers that followed Sophia were sympathetic, pitying. The grieving sister, out for justice. Sophia's eyes locked with Marcus's across the room. The hatred in her gaze was palpable, causing Marcus to involuntarily take a step back. Veronica, sensing the shift in atmosphere, tightened her grip on Marcus's arm. Ignore her, Veronica hissed. She can't touch us. Remember the plan. But Marcus wasn't so sure anymore. The plan had seemed foolproof in the aftermath of Olivia's death. But now, with the police sniffing around and Sophia on the warpath, he felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. As the night wore on, Marcus found himself increasingly isolated. Old friends made excuses to avoid conversation. Business associates suddenly remembered urgent phone calls. Even his most loyal sycophants were keeping their distance. It was nearing midnight when David finally approached him, a grim set to his usually jovial features. "We need to talk," David said, his voice low. "Not here. Meet me at the usual place in an hour." Before Marcus could respond, David melted back into the crowd. Unease settled in Marcus's stomach like a lead weight. An hour later, Marcus slipped into a booth at O'Malley's, a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen that had been their go-to spot since their college days. David was already there, a half-empty whiskey in front of him. "What's this about, David?" Marcus asked, signaling the bartender for a drink. David took a long swig of his whiskey before meeting Marcus's eyes. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus. The lies, the cover-up, it's eating me alive. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. What are you talking about? There's nothing to cover up. Olivia's death was an accident. David's laugh was hollow. Was it? Because Olivia came to me, Marcus, 2 weeks before she died. She was terrified, said you'd threatened her. The color drained from Marcus's face. What? David, you can't believe. I didn't want to. David cut him off. But then she died, and you showed up at her funeral with Veronica and... He shook his head. It doesn't add up, Marcus. And I can't be a part of it anymore. Marcus leaned forward, his voice urgent. David, listen to me. Whatever Olivia told you, she was confused. Paranoid. You know how she could get. Don't. David's voice was sharp. Don't you dare speak ill of her. Not now. A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, David stood, tossing some bills on the table. I'm going to the police, Marcus. I'm telling them everything I know. I'm sorry, but I have to do what's right. As David turned to leave, Marcus felt his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. In a moment of desperation, he called out, "She was pregnant." David froze, his hand on the door. Slowly, he turned back to Marcus, his face a mask of shock. "What did you say?" Marcus swallowed hard, the words bitter on his tongue. "Olivia, she was pregnant when she died, about 8 weeks along." David stumbled back to the booth, collapsing into the seat. How do you know?" "The autopsy report," Marcus said quietly. "I paid the examiner to keep it out of the official record. I thought I was protecting her memory." David's face had gone ashen. "Marcus," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Olivia and the implication hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Marcus felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "You and Olivia?" he managed to choke out. "When?" David's eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "It wasn't an affair, not really. It was just one night. She was upset about you and Veronica, and I've loved her for years, Marcus. I'm sorry, but I have." Marcus's mind reeled. His wife, his best friend, the baby that could have been his, or David's. It was too much. As the two men sat in stunned silence, neither noticed the woman in the next booth, her phone recording every word of their conversation. Sophia Reynolds smiled to herself, knowing she had just gotten the ammunition she needed to blow this case wide open. Outside O'Malley's, Detective Lisa Rodriguez sat in her unmarked car, watching the bar's entrance. She had followed Marcus here on a hunch, and now her instincts were screaming that something big was about to break. As the neon signs flickered in the New York night, the web of lies surrounding Olivia Hartley's death began to unravel, thread by treacherous thread. The rhythmic tapping of computer keys echoed through Mike Dawson's cramped office. The private investigator's eyes were bloodshot from hours of staring at the screen, but he couldn't stop now. He was close to something big, he could feel it. "Come on, Veronica," he muttered, scrolling through years of public records. "What are you hiding?" A knock at the door startled him. Sophia Reynolds entered, looking as immaculate as ever in a tailored Burberry trench coat. "Any progress, Mr. Dawson?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Mike leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. "Oh, we've got progress, all right. Your brother-in-law's fiancée? She's not who she says she is." Sophia leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "Go on." Mike turned his computer screen towards her. "Veronica Blake? She didn't exist until about 3 years ago. Before that, she was Vanessa Blackwood, originally from a small town in Idaho." "Idaho?" Sophia's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched. "Our Veronica is about as far from Idaho as you can get." Mike nodded. "Exactly. She reinvented herself. And here's where it gets interesting." He pulled up a news article. Vanessa Blackwood was married to a wealthy tech entrepreneur named Robert Blackwood. He died under mysterious circumstances 5 years ago, drowned in their pool after a night of heavy drinking. Sophia's eyes widened. "Let me guess. She inherited everything?" Bingo, Mike confirmed. But here's the kicker. 2 months before Robert's death, he changed his will, leaving everything to his young wife. The original will had left most of his estate to various charities. Sophia sat back, processing the information. So we have a black widow on our hands. It gets better, Mike continued, his excitement palpable. After Robert's death, there were whispers of foul play. But before the police could build a case, Vanessa disappeared. The money was funneled through a series of offshore accounts, and she vanished without a trace. Until she resurfaced as Veronica Blake. Sophia finished, her mind racing. Mike nodded grimly. And now she's engaged to another wealthy man whose wife died under suspicious circumstances. History repeating itself, Mrs. Reynolds. Sophia stood abruptly, pacing the small office. We need to take this to the police. Surely this is enough to... Not so fast, Mike cautioned. We're dealing with circumstantial evidence and a lot of conjecture. We need something concrete to tie Veronica to Olivia's death. Sophia's face hardened with determination. Then we'll find it, whatever it takes. As Sophia left the office, her mind whirling with possibilities, Mike turned back to his computer. He had a hunch there was more to uncover about Veronica's past, and he wasn't going to rest until he found it. Across town, in the sleek offices of the NYPD's Special Victims Unit, Detective Lisa Rodriguez was piecing together her own puzzle. What have we got? She asked, addressing her team gathered around the evidence board. Detective Mike Callahan stepped forward. I've been digging into Marcus Hartley's financials. There's something off about his charitable foundation. Large sums of money being moved around, but not all of it's accounted for in their public records. Lisa nodded, her suspicions confirmed. Good work. What about the autopsy report? A young officer cleared her throat nervously. That's complicated, Detective. The official report shows no signs of foul play, but I managed to get my hands on some preliminary notes from the ME's office. There were some inconsistencies that were left out of the final report. Lisa's eyes narrowed. What kind of inconsistencies? The officer hesitated. Well, for one, there were traces of a sedative in Mrs. Hartley's system. Not enough to be lethal on its own, but enough to impair balance and coordination. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Lisa spoke, her voice tight with controlled anger. So we're looking at a potential cover-up. The question is, how high does it go? As the team continued to brainstorm, Lisa's phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. Meet me at Riverside Park, near the 79th Street Boat Basin. 1 hour. Come alone. DC. Lisa's pulse quickened. She had a pretty good idea who DC was, and if she was right, this could break the case wide open. An hour later, Lisa found herself walking along the Hudson River, the city skyline glittering in the distance. A figure emerged from the shadows. David Chun, looking haggard and nervous. Mr. Chun, Lisa greeted him cautiously. I take it you have something to tell me? David nodded, his eyes darting around as if expecting to be followed. Detective, what I'm about to tell you, it could destroy lives, but I can't keep silent anymore. Olivia deserves justice. As David began to speak, pouring out the secrets he'd been carrying, Lisa listened intently, her mind racing to connect the dots. The pregnancy, the affair, Marcus's threats, it was all starting to come together. But even as the pieces fell into place, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that they were only scratching the surface. Something told her that the true depths of this conspiracy were darker and more far-reaching than anyone suspected. As the moon rose over the New York skyline, casting long shadows across the city, the players in this deadly game moved their pieces, unaware that they were all being manipulated by an unseen hand. In a luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, Veronica Blake stood at the window, a glass of champagne in her hand. Her phone buzzed with a message. Phase 2 complete. Proceed as planned. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. Everything was falling into place, just as she'd orchestrated. Soon, she would have everything she'd ever wanted, and no one, not Marcus, not Sophia, not even the dogged Detective Rodriguez, would be able to stop her. Little did she know, fate had other plans, and the ghosts of her past were about to come back to haunt her in ways she could never have imagined. The Hartley penthouse, usually a bastion of modern luxury and calm, crackled with tension. Marcus paced the expansive living room, his Ferragamo loafers wearing a path in the plush carpet. The New York skyline twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, oblivious to the storm brewing within. "This is a disaster," Marcus muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "David going to the police, Sophia on the warpath. It's all falling apart." Veronica lounged on the white leather sofa, seemingly unperturbed as she sipped a glass of Cristal. "Darling, you're overreacting. We've planned for this, remember? Everything is under control." Marcus whirled on her, his eyes blazing. "Under control? Are you insane? The police are sniffing around, asking questions about Olivia's death. It's only a matter of time before." "Before what, Marcus?" Veronica cut in, her voice suddenly sharp. "Before they discover it wasn't an accident? Before they find out what you did?" Marcus froze, his face draining of color. "What I did? What are you talking about?" Veronica rose gracefully, setting her champagne flute aside. "Oh, come now, darling. Did you really think I didn't know? The argument with Olivia that night, the convenient accident afterward. I must say, I was impressed by your initiative." You knew," Marcus stammered, his world tilting on its axis. Veronica's laugh was cold and mirthless. "Of course I knew. I've been playing this game a lot longer than you have, Marcus. Why do you think I was so eager to help cover it up?" As the implications of her words sank in, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you?" he whispered. Veronica's smile was predatory. "I'm the woman who's going to make all your problems disappear, darling. For a price, of course." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at the screen, his frown deepening. "It's David. He wants to meet. Says it's urgent." "Perfect," Veronica purred. "This is our chance to nip this little problem in the bud. Go meet him, Marcus. And remember, we're in this together now." As Marcus left, still reeling from the revelations, Veronica's smile faded. She pulled out a burner phone, dialing a number from memory. "It's me," she said when the line connected. "Phase 3 is a go. Be ready." Across town, in a dimly lit bar in the meatpacking district, David Chun nursed a whiskey, his hands shaking slightly. When Marcus slid into the booth across from him, David barely looked up. "I went to the police," David said without preamble. "Told them everything I know." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. "Everything?" David nodded grimly. "The pregnancy, the affair, your threats. All of it." "Damn it, David," Marcus hissed, leaning across the table. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I did what I had to do," David replied, finally meeting Marcus's gaze. "For Olivia. For the baby that might have been mine." Marcus sat back, his mind racing. "So what now? Are they coming to arrest me?" David shook his head. "Not yet. They need more evidence. But it's only a matter of time, Marcus. You need to come clean. Tell them what really happened that night." For a moment, Marcus considered it. The weight of his secrets had been crushing him, and the thought of unburdening himself was tempting. But then he thought of Veronica, of her cryptic words earlier. He couldn't risk it. "I'm sorry, David," Marcus said, standing abruptly. "I can't do that." As he turned to leave, David called after him, "Marcus, wait. There's something else you need to know about Veronica." But Marcus was already gone, disappearing into the New York night. Back at the penthouse, Marcus burst through the door, his face flushed with anger and fear. "Veronica," he called. "We need to talk." He found her in the study, calmly shredding documents. "Hello, darling," she said, not looking up. "How was your chat with David?" "Cut the crap, Veronica," Marcus snapped. "I want the truth. All of it. Now." Veronica sighed, setting aside the shredder. "Very well. What do you want to know? Who are you really? What's your endgame here?" Veronica's smile was cold. I told you, Marcus, I'm the solution to all your problems. As for my endgame, well, let's just say I have big plans for Hartley Industries. Plans that don't include you. The realization hit Marcus like a freight train. You've been playing me this whole time. Bravo, Veronica mocked. You finally figured it out. Yes, Marcus, I've been playing you. Just like I played Robert Blackwood before you. And just like him, you've outlived your usefulness. As she spoke, Veronica reached into her desk drawer, pulling out a sleek handgun. Marcus stumbled backward, his eyes wide with fear. You don't have to do this, he pleaded. We can work something out. Veronica laughed. Oh, Marcus, always trying to negotiate. But I'm afraid this is one deal you won't be walking away from. Just as she raised the gun, a voice rang out from the doorway. NYPD, drop the weapon. Detective Lisa Rodriguez stood there, her own gun trained on Veronica. Behind her, Sophia Reynolds watched the scene unfold, her face a mixture of shock and vindication. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then several things happened at once. Veronica, with lightning-fast reflexes, swung the gun towards Lisa. Marcus, seeing his chance, lunged for Veronica. 2 shots rang out in quick succession, shattering the penthouse's quiet. As the echoes faded, Marcus found himself on the floor, a searing pain in his shoulder. Veronica lay motionless beside him, a pool of blood spreading beneath her. Lisa rushed forward, kicking Veronica's gun away and checking for a pulse. Finding none, she turned to Marcus, her voice tight. Mr. Hartley, you're under arrest for the murder of Olivia Hartley. As Lisa read him his rights, Marcus locked eyes with Sophia. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The truth about Olivia's death was far more complicated than anyone had imagined, and the real story was only just beginning to unfold. As sirens wailed in the distance and the first hints of dawn began to color the New York sky, the players in this tragic drama realized that the game was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The New York County Courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Reporters crowded the steps, their cameras flashing like strobe lights as black SUVs pulled up to the curb. The trial of the decade was about to begin. Inside, the courtroom was a powder keg of tension. Marcus Hartley, looking haggard in his tailored suit, sat at the defense table, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Across the aisle, Sophia Reynolds stared daggers at her brother-in-law, her jaw set in grim determination. As Judge Eleanor Simmons entered, calling the court to order, a hush fell over the room. The air was thick with anticipation as District Attorney Sarah Martinez rose to deliver her opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Martinez began, her voice clear and confident. This case is about greed, deception, and the ultimate betrayal. Marcus Hartley, a man of wealth and influence, murdered his wife, Olivia, in cold blood to protect his fortune and his reputation. The prosecution will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Hartley, with the help of his accomplice, the late Veronica Blake, orchestrated a complex scheme that ended with Olivia Hartley's tragic death. As Martinez laid out the prosecution's case, Marcus's defense attorney, the renowned Alan Dershowitz, scribbled notes furiously. When it was his turn to speak, Dershowitz painted a different picture. The prosecution's case is built on conjecture and circumstantial evidence, Dershowitz argued. Yes, my client made mistakes. Yes, he had an affair. But that doesn't make him a murderer. The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is far more complex than the simplistic narrative the state would have you believe. Over the next weeks, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Detective Lisa Rodriguez testified about the inconsistencies in the original investigation. David Chun, looking haunted, recounted his affair with Olivia and the confrontation with Marcus on the night of her death. But it was the testimony of Mike Dawson, the private investigator hired by Sophia, that truly electrified the courtroom. Your Honor, Dawson said, his voice steady, my investigation uncovered a web of deceit that goes far beyond Mr. Hartley. Veronica Blake, also known as Vanessa Blackwood, was part of a sophisticated crime ring specializing in seducing and defrauding wealthy individuals. But she was just a pawn in a much larger game. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Dawson continued. The real mastermind behind this operation is a person known only as the Puppet Master. This individual has been orchestrating similar schemes across the country for years, always staying one step ahead of the law. As Dawson's testimony unfolded, revealing the intricate details of the conspiracy, Marcus sat in stunned silence. The full scope of his manipulation was becoming clear, and with it, the realization that he had been little more than a pawn himself. On the final day of the trial, in a move that shocked everyone, Marcus Hartley took the stand. As he was sworn in, his eyes met Sophia's, and for the first time since Olivia's death, there was a flicker of understanding between them. "I've made many mistakes," Marcus began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I was unfaithful to Olivia. I lied to protect myself. But I did not kill my wife." As Marcus recounted the events of that fateful night, a hush fell over the courtroom. He described a heated argument with Olivia, her threats to expose his financial misdeeds, and his desperate plea for her to reconsider. "I left the house that night angry and afraid," Marcus continued. "When I returned hours later, I found Olivia at the bottom of the stairs. I panicked. I called Veronica, and together we staged the scene to look like an accident. I've regretted that decision every day since." Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he turned to face Sophia directly. "I loved Olivia, despite my failings. I never wanted her dead. I'm so sorry, Sophia, for everything." As Marcus stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Judge Simmons called for order, her gavel echoing through the room. In the midst of the commotion, Detective Rodriguez slipped out of the courtroom, her phone pressed to her ear. "Did you get all that?" she asked urgently. "Good. Move in now. We've got our puppet master." As the jury deliberated, news broke of a massive FBI raid on a penthouse in Trump Tower. The elusive puppet master, revealed to be a reclusive billionaire with connections to organized crime, was finally in custody. When the verdict was read, it was anticlimactic. Marcus Hartley, found guilty of obstruction of justice and financial crimes, but acquitted of murder. As he was led away in handcuffs, his eyes found Sophia's one last time. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The truth about Olivia's death, a tragic accident born of heated emotions and terrible timing, would remain known only to them. Outside the courthouse, as reporters clamored for statements, Sophia stood alone on the steps, her face a mask of complex emotions. Detective Rodriguez approached her, touching her arm gently. "It's over," Lisa said softly. "We got them all. The whole network." Sophia nodded, her eyes distant. "But at what cost? My sister is still gone." As the two women stood in silence, watching the media frenzy unfold, they both knew that the ramifications of this case would be felt for years to come. The exposure of the Puppet Masters network had sent shockwaves through New York's elite circles, and the ripples were only beginning to spread. In the end, as the sun set over the New York skyline, casting long shadows across the city, the truth had indeed come to light. But like all truths, it was messy, complicated, and ultimately unsatisfying. The story of Olivia Hartley's death, and the web of lies and deceit that surrounded it, would become the stuff of legend, a cautionary tale of greed, power, and the ultimate price of betrayal in the city that never sleeps. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. A small group had gathered around a pristine white marble headstone, the name Olivia Hartley etched in elegant script. Sophia Reynolds stood at the forefront, her face a mask of quiet grief. Detective Lisa Rodriguez hung back, feeling like an intruder in this intimate moment. The trial was over, the verdicts delivered, but the wounds were still raw. "I can't believe it's been a year," Sophia murmured, placing a single white rose on the grave. "So much has changed, Liv. I wish you could see it." As if on cue, a soft cry broke the silence. David Chun stepped forward, cradling a tiny bundle in his arms. The baby, just 3 months old, had Olivia's eyes. "She has her smile too," David said softly, handing the infant to Sophia. "Little Olivia is going to grow up knowing how amazing her mother was." Sophia cradled her niece, tears glistening in her eyes. The DNA test had confirmed what they'd all suspected: David was the father. It was a bittersweet revelation, a final gift from Olivia that had brought healing in its wake. As the group paid their respects, Lisa's phone buzzed. She stepped away to take the call, returning moments later with a grim expression. "That was the DA's office," she announced. "Marcus Hartley's appeal has been denied. He'll serve out his full sentence." A collective sigh rippled through the group. Marcus's 10-year sentence for financial crimes and obstruction of justice had been a point of contention, with many feeling it was too lenient. "And the puppet master?" David asked, his voice tight. Lisa's face hardened. "Going away for life. The FBI has dismantled his entire network. It's over." As they left the cemetery, Sophia hung back, walking alongside Lisa. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for not giving up, even when the case seemed impossible." Lisa nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Just doing my job, Mrs. Reynolds. But I have to admit, this one was personal. Olivia deserved justice." They reached the parking lot, where a sleek black town car waited. The driver opened the door, revealing an elegant interior. "Can I offer you a ride, detective?" Sophia asked. Lisa hesitated, then nodded. As they settled into the plush leather seats, Sophia pulled out a thick manila envelope. "I wanted to show you this," she said, handing it to Lisa. "It's the foundation I've set up in Olivia's name. We're going to help victims of domestic abuse, provide legal aid, shelter, whatever they need." Lisa flipped through the documents, impressed by the scope of the project. "This is amazing, Sophia. Olivia would be proud." Sophia's eyes misted over. "I hope so. I just keep thinking, if she'd had somewhere to turn, someone to help her stand up to Marcus sooner." "You can't blame yourself," Lisa said gently. "Olivia made her choices, but this is how you honor her memory, by helping others." As the car wound its way through the streets of New York, Sophia and Lisa fell into a contemplative silence. The city sprawled around them, a testament to human resilience and the capacity for both great evil and profound good. At Lisa's precinct, the car pulled to a stop. As she prepared to exit, Sophia caught her hand. "There's one more thing," Sophia said, her voice low. "I've been doing some digging of my own. The Puppet Masters network. I don't think we got all of it. There are threads still out there, connections that don't quite add up." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" Sophia took a deep breath. "I think this goes deeper than we realized. Way deeper. And I want your help to uncover the truth." For a moment, Lisa hesitated. The case was closed, the bad guys behind bars. Did she really want to pull at this thread, to risk unraveling everything they'd fought so hard to achieve? But as she looked into Sophia's determined eyes, she knew her answer. "I'm in," she said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll find the truth." As Lisa stepped out of the car, the weight of this new mission settled on her shoulders. The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. There were more secrets to uncover, more lies to expose. But for now, as the sun set over the New York skyline, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, there was a sense of peace. Justice had been served, however imperfectly. Olivia's memory would live on through her daughter and the foundation bearing her name. And somewhere out there, the next chapter of this twisted tale was waiting to be written. Lisa smiled to herself as she climbed the steps to the precinct. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. In the gathering dusk, Sophia's car pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the flow of traffic. The city pulsed around them, a living, breathing entity full of stories yet to be told. As night fell over New York, the ghosts of the past mingled with the promise of the future. The game wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button below and join our community. Based on your interests, we've picked this story for you that's showing on your screen right now. Click to watch it now. We're sure you'll love it. See you next time.